The first morning of the new school term, the school was filled with laughter. Children ran around as if the whole world was bright and cheerful. But Tidy looked up at the sky. She wasn't looking for beauty, she was looking for change. Because in her world, the only thing that could change was hope. Tidy, what color will the sky be tonight? The girl next to her, do you look at the sky every day? Tidy, the sky is never the same every day. First day of the new school term. Teacher, today draw my happiness. Boy, mine is a big house. Another girl, mine is a new phone. Boy laughs. Yours looks sad, Tidy. Tidy, it's because a rainbow is coming. The classroom was filled with bright colors, a big house, expensive toys, perfect smiles. But on Tidy's paper, there were gray clouds. Not because she liked the gloom, but because she knew that a rainbow wouldn't appear without rain first. And perhaps true happiness doesn't begin on a clear day. Boy, did you draw the wrong topic? It's nothing like ours. Another child, it doesn't look like happiness. Tidy, smiling faintly, maybe happiness is coming. Laughter rang out softly, not loud enough to shake the room, but loud enough to make a small heart feel. That day, Tidy began to understand the word different. Different doesn't mean wrong. Different doesn't mean worthless. Sometimes seeing the rainbow before anyone else means we have to stand alone under the clouds. And this was the beginning of a little girl who believed that if we never see the gray clouds, we will never know how beautiful a rainbow is. The bullying started small. Her friends called her Rain Cloud because she was quiet, because she didn't like to show off, because she wasn't good enough to be a clown, a boy. The rain cloud is coming. Another girl. She's as quiet as the rain. Taidy. We just prefer to listen to talk. A boy laughed. That's why nobody hears her. Faint words, like a gentle breeze. Rain cloud. A name that didn't sound harsh, but heavy enough to make a small heart feel differently. In a classroom filled with laughter, Taidy stood there, not crying, not retaliating, but she began to feel that some of the laughter didn't invite a smile at all. Someone hid her bag. Someone wrote the word strange in her notebook. Someone created a group chat with no name in it. Taidy murmuring, "Where's my bag?" One child, "Oh, can't find it?" Another voice whispered, "Look at her notebook. The word strange is so clear." The word strange was written in the notebook. The group chat was created without her name. The teacher didn't see it. The adults didn't know. Everything seemed small. It seemed like something ordinary. But for an 8-year-old's heart, it was big enough to silence the whole world. Taidy began to ask herself, if happiness is laughing together, why are we standing outside? Perhaps some people's happiness comes from someone standing outside the circle, and that question slowly began to grow in her heart. In the classroom, there was a small system that no one talked about. The front desks were for the favorites. The middle desks were for the average person. The back desks were for the odd ones out. Taidy stood at the edge, the space for those who weren't loud enough to be leaders, but also not mischievous enough to be explicitly punished. That morning, the teacher announced in a calm voice, "Anyone who hasn't submitted their homework is considered irresponsible." Taidy, standing up, her voice trembling, "I did it, but—" A voice interrupted, "Another excuse." Laughter echoed throughout the room. The teacher sighed. If you want a good society, you have to start with honesty. When the teacher said the word society, it sounded too big to fit in the heart of an 8-year-old, but the laughter in the room was loud enough to make her feel small. After school, the truth was hidden in the sports equipment bin. Her homework hadn't disappeared, it had been made to disappear. Taidy, softly, "This was ours." The same boy looked at her. "That's how the world is. The weak get trampled on." Taidy, "And what if I don't want to trample on anyone?" The boy was silent for a moment. The boy's words sounded like an adult speaking through a child's mouth. "The weak will be trampled on." It wasn't just teasing, it was an unwritten rule. And Taidy began to wonder, if that rule was wrong, who would dare erase it? That night, Taidy redrew the picture. Taidy muttering as she painted, "If I plant them in the rain, will they grow?" She smiled faintly. "Perhaps the storm will strengthen the roots." A girl stood in the storm. Her feet were muddy. In her hand, she clutched tiny seeds. The seeds hadn't sprouted yet. They weren't beautiful. It was uncertain if they would survive. But she knew something. The heavy rain wasn't just there to get wet. Sometimes it was there to test whether we would let the seeds fall or hold on tighter. That evening, soft orange sunlight streamed through the old wooden windows. The house was quiet, as if waiting for a small answer from a little girl. Taidy sat with her knees hugged to her chest beside her grandfather. Her grandfather used to be a teacher, back when children had to stand straight and sing songs every morning without understanding the meaning. "Grandfather, what did school teach you today?" Taidy thought for a long time. "They taught me to obey." The faint scent of old newspaper wafted in the air. The word obey escaped her lips softly, like a lesson she had memorized but not fully understood. "Grandfather, and did they teach you to think?" Taidy shakes her head gently. Grandfather chuckled softly. It wasn't a funny laugh, but the laugh of someone who understood something too well. He slowly put down the newspaper as if placing a thought on the wooden table. Sometimes they're not afraid of disobedient children. They're afraid of children who think. That sentence lingered in the room. Taidy felt as if a new door had opened in her heart. She looked at his face. "Taidy, if I think, will I be wrong?" "Grandpa, if your thoughts don't hurt anyone, you're not wrong, but you might feel lonely." The word lonely weighed more heavily, heavier than the teasing, heavier than the test scores. But there was a certain spark hidden within, like the first star beginning to shine in the dark sky. Grandpa gently stroked her shoulder, and in that moment, Taidy understood that thinking might make her stand alone sometimes, but it also allowed her to stand on her own 2 feet that night. She wasn't afraid of the silence. For the first time, she began to listen to her own thoughts. The next morning, a class president was elected. The classroom was bustling like a small festival. The loudest child stood on stage, talking about rules, orderliness, and obedience. A chorus of applause erupted, as if rehearsed. The boy on stage, "Just follow the teacher, and everything will be all right." Taidy raised her hand to ask, "Taidy, if the rules aren't fair, should we question them?" But Taidy's small question brought the entire room to a standstill. The silence was wider than any answer. A boy whispered, "Are you going to be a revolutionary?" The teacher smiled faintly. "Good question, but think about that when you're older." The phrase "growing up" hung in the air like a box yet to be opened. Adults always leave the answers for the future, as if today is too young for the concept of justice. Taidy sat down slowly. She wasn't angry, but she was beginning to see that some systems didn't just slam their doors shut, they also slammed them shut quietly with questions. After school, the classroom was quieter than in the morning. Taidy placed a small treat on the boys' desk. Not to win the election, not to change the vote, but to change something bigger. He looked at her. The boy. Are you trying to buy my voice? Taidy. No, I just thought you might be tired. The word tired made him pause, because sometimes those who step on others may be standing on their own tiredness. Taidy's plan was small. Too small to announce on stage, but big enough to make one heart stop thinking in its old ways for a moment. The playground was filled with vibrant colors, but a certain tense atmosphere was beginning to emerge. One child, "My shoes are the newest." Another laughed, "Anyone without a tablet is outdated." The children established their own hierarchies without the teacher's instruction. Those with the newest items were the stars. Those who were quiet were the odd ones out. Popularity became like an invisible medal. Silence, however, was branded as a sin. Taidy watched. She began to see that some of the laughter wasn't quiet at all. It had a sharp, piercing glint. In the parents' group chat, there was a mocking post that made some people laugh. Some adults considered it a minor issue. But for one child, it was nothing. An adult's voice from the phone. "Kids these days tease each other quite harshly." Taidy murmured softly, "It really is harsh for some people." Taidy began to understand that bullying wasn't just a children's problem. It was a microcosm of the larger world. That night, she wrote in her notebook, in her rounded handwriting, "If happiness means stepping on someone, is it true happiness?" The question wasn't spoken aloud, but it was powerful enough to echo in her heart. A loud thud sounded as Taidy's small body fell in the middle of the field. Dust billowed up, accompanied by rhythmic laughter. It sounded like a rehearsal. A boy. "Because you like to act superior to everyone else." Taidy looked up, bewildered. Blood seeped from her small knee. Taidy. "I just don't laugh when someone gets hurt." The voices quieted slightly, but the word superior hurt more. Because not laughing at someone else's pain shouldn't make anyone feel inferior. Another child. "If you don't laugh, you're an enemy." Taidy. "Enemy? Just because I don't hurt anyone?" The word enemy slipped out easily, yet it weighed too much for an 8-year-old to bear. Taidy got up, trembling slightly, but her voice was clear. She looked around, seeing eyes that lacked the confidence reflected in the laughter. Some people fell silent, because some words, once spoken, always echo back at the speaker. Taidy. "Are you afraid? Afraid that no one will ever be inferior to you?" The atmosphere froze, as if time had stopped. The teacher rushed in. "Stop! This is a school, not a battlefield." The stern voice tried to restore order, but one child murmured softly, "This is just like a battlefield, only without the blood." That day, Taidy didn't win. There was no applause. No one admitted she was right. But she made someone feel guilty. And guilt? For some, it's more terrifying than anger. Because anger makes you scream. But guilt makes you look in the mirror. The news spread quietly, like wisps of smoke that no one wanted to see. The boy who used to tease Taidy became the target instead, surrounded by a larger group of children in the bathroom. His phone was snatched, his shoes hidden. Audio recordings were circulated. One child, "Poor and still acting tough." Another voice added, "Doesn't your house have air conditioning?" The laughter continued in the same rhythm. Only the names of the people in the sentences changed. The structure remained the same. Only the sequence kept turning. The next day, he didn't come to school. The desk that used to be noisy was silent. An adult's voice. Just teach your son to be strong. Some adults use the word strong as a shield against all problems, but sometimes it means enduring without anyone's help. Taidy murmured, strong or just enduring alone. Taidy looked at the empty chair, feeling that the silence was louder than the teasing. When he returned, the once stern eyes were empty. He sat with his head down. The friend who had been standing beside him had moved the desk away. No one wants to be infected with the word weak. The boy murmured softly. Taidy looked at the scene and understood something clearly. Taidy whispered to himself, no one really wins. This system doesn't create winners. It only creates those whose turn it isn't yet. And in that brightly colored classroom, that truth is the darkest.
A friend whispered, it's your turn to get revenge. Taidy murmured softly, revenge, and will it really end? The word revenge floated into Taidy's ears. It sounded sweet, like sugar-coated candy, but she knew it might be bitter inside, the pain of someone who had hurt her. It offered her the easiest option, to smile and watch him fall. But her heart grew heavier, because sometimes not adding insult to injury requires more effort than pushing him further away. After school, soft golden sunlight streamed through the window. Taidy knelt down, placing the bandages beside him. No laughter, no one watching. Only silence, creating space for the truth. Taidy, does it hurt? He chuckled dryly. The boy, you know perfectly well. Taidy, should we stop it here? He looked at her. The boy, can two children stop a system? She didn't answer immediately. Taidy, maybe not, but we can stop ourselves. She knew two children might not be able to change the entire system, but every system starts with small, repeated actions. If today she chose not to get revenge, one cycle ends here. Sometimes the harder choice isn't to fight back, but to avoid passing that pain on to anyone else. Under the large tree behind the school, golden sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting soft shadows. The boy spoke without looking at her. His voice wasn't as harsh as before. It was like someone who had just laid down their armor. Boy, I used to think that if I made other people smaller, I would look bigger. Taidy. Taidy listened quietly, because sometimes not interrupting was a form of courage. He continued, but now I just feel empty. Taidy replied softly, it never really made you bigger, it just hurt others. Boy, and you? Have you ever wanted them to hurt? The question was sharp, like the tip of a dry twig. Taidy didn't avert her gaze. She nodded slowly, because the truth didn't always have to be beautiful. Everyone has had moments when they wanted the world to hurt as much as they themselves did. That thought didn't make her evil, it just made her human. Taidy, yes, when I was crying alone, I wanted everyone to hurt too. Boy, then why didn't you? She took a deep breath. Taidy, because if I did, then I'll become the same thing that hurt me. The boy chuckled softly. It's easier to be cruel. Taidy smiled faintly. Yes, but I don't want to be easy. A cool breeze rustled beneath the trees, the leaves rustling gently as if acknowledging the answer. Cruelty might be easier, no need to think, no need to hold back tears, but choosing not to be cruel requires more courage. That evening, there was no winner, no loser, Just two children, growing up together, under the same tree. A small group formed, without a name, without symbols, without stickers on their bags. There was just a table in the corner of the room where a few people sat around it. Their voices weren't loud, but sincere. Each sentence was like a window opening into the world of each other's homes. One girl, "My dad says you have to step on the world before you get stepped on." Another boy, "My mom says don't meddle in other people's affairs or you'll get into trouble." Taidy listened. If everyone thought like that, who would be left to be stepped on? The children. Taidy's question wasn't loud, but it silenced the entire table. That silence wasn't fear, it was the moment when thoughts began to work. They didn't have fancy answers, no grand plans, but in each child's eyes, something moved slightly. One child whispered, "We won't laugh today." Another nodded, "And invite them to sit with us." They didn't become heroes, they didn't stop bullying throughout the school, but they stopped it at their own table. Some stopped laughing. Some started greeting those who used to sit alone. The change was so small, almost invisible from afar. But for those who used to sit alone, it's big enough to change the whole day. And the truth is, it often starts from the smallest things. One day, the teacher's lounge was illuminated by the afternoon sun, but the atmosphere was heavier than the playground. The teacher called Taidy aside. "Teacher, I've heard you like to ask questions." "Taidy, I'm just curious." The teacher sighed. "The world isn't simple. Sometimes silence is safer." "Taidy, safer for whom?" That question silenced the teacher. The word safe always sounds good to adults, but when Taidy asked in return, "Safer for whom?" silence replaced any explanation. Sometimes a child's questions don't shake the world, they just force adults to look beyond the familiar. After school, a cool breeze swept across the school grounds. The mother of the boy who used to tease her approached the little girl with a question that wasn't harsh like a reprimand, but heavy with longing for her own child. "Parent, has my child changed because of you?" Taidy lowered her head. "I just listened to him." The parent was silent, before speaking softly. "Thank you. Sometimes we adults never listen." Taidy didn't explain at length. She simply stated the truth, that she did listen, and sometimes listening is what adults forget to do. The darkness of the world isn't just in children pushing each other down. It's in the moments when adults see it and choose to remain silent, choose to be safe, choose not to interfere. Taidy murmured softly, "Maybe adults are afraid too." Taidy walked slowly under the changing sky. She began to understand that changing the world isn't just a matter for children or adults. It's about anyone who dares to listen before judging and dares to ask before letting silence win. It may not be visible from afar, but for someone who is sat alone, it's big enough to change an entire day. And the truth often begins at the smallest point. The classroom that morning was brighter than usual. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a soft golden glow on the floor. The teacher's question seemed ordinary. "What is happiness?" Taidy stood up. "Happiness is not having to fear being abandoned because we are weak." A boy, "But what if the world is cruel?" Taidy, "If the world is cruel, and we are cruel too, the world becomes even crueler." But the little girl's answer silenced some. Her perspective on happiness wasn't about new toys, not about loud praise, but about a safe space, where we don't have to be strong all the time. When she spoke of the world's cruelty, no one laughed, no one whispered. There was only silence. That silence began to form questions in each person's mind. One girl, softly, "We were afraid too." The teacher, softening her voice, "Perhaps I forgot to ask you that." This silence wasn't emptiness. It was the sound of thought, the sound of hearts reflecting on something. Some children lowered their heads, not because they were ashamed, but because they were thinking about the days they had unintentionally hurt someone. Taidy's answer, maybe it wasn't the answer everyone wanted to hear, because it forces us to look at ourselves. But sometimes, the answer no one wants to hear is the answer the world needs most. And in that small classroom, the silence is slowly changing something. The first page of her sketchbook was filled with gray clouds. The first page of her sketchbook was filled with gray clouds. Clouds don't last forever, like rainbows, but they make us smile. But she didn't erase them. She drew a smaller rainbow next to them instead, because she was beginning to understand that storms aren't always meant to destroy. Sometimes they make us see colors more clearly. She added people to the picture, many people, standing under the same sky. We're all under the same sky, the boy in her memories. But some people experience more storms. Not everyone survives the storm. Not everyone understands immediately. But suffering makes her see happiness more clearly, like the silence that makes us appreciate the value of laughter. The school still has hierarchies, still has power structures, still has people stepping on each other to climb higher. A child, the school is still the same. Taidy, but we don't need to be the same. The world doesn't change overnight, but in a small space, an 8-year-old girl choosing not to pass on the pain, and perhaps not passing it on might be the beginning of change. This lesson is not in textbooks, but it's already written in her heart. The last day of the term. The classroom was filled with the sounds of bags being packed and laughter, but at the back of the room, a sentence was written silently. No signature, no explanation, just a question that didn't need an immediate answer. If we don't know suffering, how will we know what true happiness is? Many people walked past, but some stopped to read. A girl, "Who wrote that?" Another boy, "That's true." Silence gradually replaced the chatter. Not an awkward silence, but the silence of thought. Some began to recall the days they cried. Some remembered the days someone reached out to them. And that sentence remained on the blackboard, like a mirror reflecting their hearts. The sky that day wasn't entirely clear. There's both sunshine and clouds today. That's good. There's both sunshine and clouds, like life. She smiled not because everything was perfect, but because she knew that happiness wasn't at the destination. It was along the way, between the tears and the genuine laughter. And perhaps if there were no suffering at all, we may never know just how precious those small moments that warm our hearts are. One evening, a little girl stood gazing at the sky, filled with both golden light and the shadows of clouds. She had cried before, she had been pushed away. She had questioned a world that seemed too cruel for an 8-year-old. But today, she no longer resented suffering. She understood that if we don't know suffering, we will never know the weight of happiness. Suffering is not the enemy. It is the quietest teacher, a teacher who doesn't shout, but teaches through the feelings in our hearts. And perhaps this little girl understood this lesson before all the adults in the world.